Today, Russia doing the unthinkable, killing more civilians. Dreadful news from Ukraine. At least 25 Ukrainian civilians killed, decimated in large-scale Russian airstrikes. Meanwhile, Russia, get ready. Ukraine officials now saying they are close to ready to launch that promised ground assault to retake Russian-occupied land. Correspondent Jim Lechner is live in Kyiv with the latest. Jim?
Well, good evening, Greta. It's good to be back with you. As you mentioned, the Russians reinitiated some strategic air attacks on Ukraine today. This followed a period of quiet here in the capital. It was 51 days without a significant attack. But again, the Russians reinitiated those attacks today, killing up to 25 people. Meanwhile, in the eastern Donbass along the front, there've also been a period of quiet there. The Russian attacks are centered mainly on the cities of Bakhmut and Avdiivka. That seems to be localized attacks, though. For the remainder of the front, it's significantly quiet. The Ukrainians have stabilized the line there after the Russians have been pushing for the last 4 months and committing hundreds of thousands of troops. And now it seems the Ukrainians are beginning to posture themselves for the much anticipated counteroffensive to take place sometime this spring or potentially early in this summer. Ukrainian leaders are sequestered away, spending most of their time focusing on this by all accounts. And what's very significant is 6 brigade combat teams have been trained by the U.S. and its allies in Western Europe and equipped with things like the Leopard tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, and Army Stryker vehicles. And so those 6 brigades will play the key role in any Ukrainian counteroffensive that comes. And this is what's being anticipated. What's also being watched and assessed is where will the Russians commit, or do they have the reserves ready to meet this offensive? They reportedly raised 500,000 troops last fall. We don't think that numbers was committed to the offensive during the winter. And so where will the remainder of these troops be? And will they be enough to meet the coming Ukrainian offensive? Back to you.
Jim Lechner, thank you very much. Former U.S. Ambassador in NATO and former Special Representative for Ukraine, Kurt Volker, joins me. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Greg.
As I look at this video and look at 25 civilians today, and you see all these buildings blown up, so many civilians, so many soldiers, at what point does someone say just enough? There seems to be no attempt at diplomacy. I don't hear that we're even trying to get involved, and I don't know if we can get it solved, but I don't hear any effort at diplomacy.
Right, because enough at this stage would essentially mean surrender. Russia is determined to fight and take as much Ukrainian territory as it can. Ukraine really doesn't have a choice but to defend itself. And it's going to defend itself and then try to recapture its own territory. What was in those videos that you just showed, it was interesting. The guy inspecting the tanks there was the defense minister of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov. He's out there in his sweatshirt and his winter hat looking at these things and trying, he's showing that he is present on the field with the troops, trying to help them with both morale and making sure everything is ready so that they can recapture their own country.
Well, if we can't have direct negotiations with Russia to try to resolve things, is there no effort to go through sort of the back door? Look, I realize that China has not condemned Russia at all for what they did, but China is talking to, President Xi was in Moscow. He just had an hour conversation with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and we've got our ally, and we've got our good friends Egypt apparently selling missiles or some weapons to Russia. So, there are a lot of people who are having sort of these side conversations. So it seems to me that, a lot of people are prospering off this, but nobody's prospering off any sort of effort to try to stop this.
Well, exactly, because Putin has staked out his claim here. He has compared himself to Peter the Great, Catherine the Great. He claims that Ukraine doesn't exist. It's not a nation. It's not a people. It's not a language. It's not a country. They're just confused Russians, and he aims to unconfuse them. Well, that is genocide, and Ukrainians have to defend themselves against that. If Putin is stopped, and that's what this counteroffensive is all about, it's about stopping Russian aggression. If he is stopped and cannot advance anymore, then maybe there's a chance actually for negotiation. Because in the end of the day, look, we all want peace. We all want Ukraine to be a sovereign, democratic, European country to build prosperity for its own people. Putin's trying to take that away from them, but if he can be stopped, then there's a chance for peace.
Is NATO doing everything it can and should do?
Well, NATO is focusing on itself, unfortunately. NATO is deterring Russian aggression against its own member states. So it is putting in place forward deployed forces. It is beefing up military spending. It's doing those sorts of things. But when it comes to helping Ukraine, NATO is not doing much at all. It's individual allies like the United States, like Germany, like the UK, like Poland. We're the ones stepping in to help Ukraine. NATO has stayed back from that. The reason is because this is Russia's war against Ukraine, and no one wants it to be confused with a NATO war against Russia. So NATO has stood back.
I find that as sort of a fiction, and as I know that Putin hasn't called us on it or NATO on it, but you've got all these NATO countries and the U.S. supplying arms, training the Ukraine military. We've even got some people on the ground, not boots on the ground. But I mean, it seems a little bit of a fiction to me as to where the line is that NATO's not involved. I mean, the minute NATO puts a dime in it, or the minute a NATO country sells a weapon or gives a weapon to Ukraine, it seems to me that Putin might call that as a NATO engagement at that point.
Well, Putin does call it a NATO engagement. Putin thinks that he is at war with the West. The idea that Ukraine exists as a sovereign country, he thinks, is a Western creation. It's nonsense. Ukraine is actually older than Russia, but he doesn't believe that. He wants to deny Ukraine's existence. And so as Western countries are indeed helping Ukraine, he's saying now that this is an all-war against the West. This is where I think the administration's position is a little weak, because if Putin already thinks he's at war against us, what are we holding back for? Why don't we just get this over with as quickly as possible, give the Ukrainians what they need?
How long can the economy of Russia withstand the sanctions we have on them?
Well, what's interesting is that the sanctions are having a long-term effect. They're decreasing the budget revenues. They're taking Europe off of Russian oil and gas. They are creating some big structural weaknesses in Russia's economy. But that doesn't have a short-term impact. That has a long-term impact. It's going to last for a generation or more. In the short term, he can do whatever he wants. He can move his military forces. He can force his population to suffer even more. And it appears that he's determined to do that.
You know, there's so many questions at the beginning of this war back in February 24th of last year is about his health, you know, and it's almost seemed like, you know, so we started waiting for him to drop over. But that hasn't happened. His health, he seems to be quite robust, at least the few appearances that he makes and we see video.
Well, he's certainly getting treatment for something. We've seen him in situations where he appears to be rather fragile. And then we've seen him, as you said, most recently in situations where he appears more robust. And the bottom line for Western policymakers is don't set your policy on whether your adversary is ill or not. Set your policy based on your interest and your capabilities. Because even if it's not Putin, it could be somebody else. We need to actually have strong, sound policies that will be successful regardless of his health situation.
Former U.S. Ambassador in NATO, Kurt Volker, thank you for joining me, sir.
Thank you, Greta.